The Bible cover felt worn and soft, like pressed felt over cardboard. But the edges still had her perfume. That strange, powdery scent of lavender and lemon oil that used to cling to her couch blankets, her glove compartment, even the buttons on her stove. I hadn't touched this book since she passed 3 weeks ago. I wasn't even supposed to have it. Technically, the boxes in her living room were meant for her niece, Diane. She was the one with the key, the one who'd flown in from Arizona and claimed the corner chair like she'd grown up in it. But I'd helped carry them out of the house because Diane's back wasn't what it used to be, and because no one says no to the woman holding the will. One of the boxes split open in my car on the way to the donation center. This one, a small one marked Keepsakes, Living Room. And inside, buried under an old cassette player and a church bulletin from 1993, was the Bible. Not a fancy one, just black leatherette, cracked at the spine. Her name was etched in gold leaf on the bottom corner, Esther D. Kirkland. I almost turned the car around, but I didn't. I didn't call her Mrs. Kirkland growing up. Everyone on our block just called her Miss Esther, even the men. She lived next door to us, on the left if you were facing our porch, and had this split-level ranch house with plastic flowers in her planters and a rocking chair that never moved. My earliest memory of her is from when I was maybe 4, maybe 5. My dad had slammed the back door so hard it cracked the top hinge. My mom was still crying in the hallway. I didn't even know what I did. I just remember running outside in my socks and sitting under our mailboxes, trying to hold in the hiccups. Miss Esther came out with a white towel, knelt down like her knees weren't made of creaky things, and wrapped it around me. "You're not cold," she said, "but sometimes you need to be held anyway." That was her. Not warm, exactly, but steady. Not loud, but there. I didn't realize how often I ended up at her house until I hit 3rd grade, and my teacher listed her as my emergency contact without asking. She had a key to our place before I knew what a spare key was. But no one ever explained why she cared so much, and I never thought to ask. I stayed in the car with the box for a long time, just sat there, gripping the steering wheel with one hand and holding the edge of the Bible with the other. You ever feel like a book is breathing? Not in a haunted way, just in a waiting way, like it's holding back until you're ready. I flipped through it without really thinking. Pages were loose in the middle, some with corners folded. She'd highlighted passages in weird colors, blue, pink, even green, never yellow. I half smiled at that. She used to say yellow looked like a sunburn on the page. That's when I saw it. Not a bookmark, not a receipt, a small, lined note card tucked between Psalms and Proverbs, faded blue ink, her handwriting, neat, slanted right, with those tight curls she made on every G. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but it had my last name in the first line. And the second line said, "I never told him. I couldn't, but it was my name before it was his." I didn't read the whole note right away. It felt like a trespass. I sat with it in my lap, fingers curled around the card like I might crumple it, and I just waited for my pulse to stop sounding like a drum. Her name was Esther Kirkland. Mine was Nate Kirkland. That much was always a joke growing up. "Oh, you must be related," people would say, and Miss Esther would just pat my head and say, "He's good as mine." And I'd roll my eyes and say, "Nah, she just adopted me without the paperwork." Only, maybe she hadn't been joking. I thought about my dad, Robert Kirkland, about how he used to dodge questions about his family, how he never talked about his parents, how he once said he was born from nothing and proud of it, and how, when he left, he didn't leave a note. Just packed up, took the silver Honda, and peeled out one August night when I was 13. I hadn't said his name out loud in years. I said it now, to the dashboard. Robert. It sounded thinner than I remembered. Miss Esther's funeral had been small. Diane tried to make it formal, but it didn't stick. The old church didn't even have proper pews anymore, just folding chairs and a Bluetooth speaker for the hymns. A few neighbors came. One guy from her prayer group, a mailman who said she used to leave mints for him. And me. I sat in the back because I couldn't decide what row I deserved. Diane read the eulogy. It wasn't bad, just cold. More facts than feelings. She didn't mention how Miss Esther used to refold her napkins 3 times before setting them down. Or how she'd turn the volume up on the evening news even though she always read the captions. She didn't mention the polka dot watering can or the paper stars Miss Esther used to tape above my bed when I had trouble sleeping. She didn't mention me at all, and I didn't say anything then because who was I? Just the neighbor kid. Except now I had a note that said she'd had my name first. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left the Bible on my coffee table, half open, like it might air out the questions somehow. I made a frozen pizza I didn't eat. I played the same voicemail from the donation center 3 times. I even tried calling Diane, just to ask if she'd maybe seen anything in the other boxes, or if there was some joke Miss Esther used to tell about us sharing a name. She didn't answer. So I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and read the note again. This time, all of it. I never told him. I couldn't. But it was my name before it was his. I didn't think he'd come back. I still don't. But if Nathan ever finds this, tell him I kept the truth folded, and I'm sorry for that. I only ever wanted to protect the piece of him I could reach. That was it. No dates. No names beyond mine. No explanation of who he was, my dad, I assumed. Just that strange phrase, the truth folded. I ran my hand over the inside cover of the Bible. Nothing there. No envelope, no pictures. I flipped back to the note card and held it up to the light, like some spy movie might reveal hidden ink. Nothing. Then I realized something. Folded. I took the card and pinched the edges. It was thicker than a single note card should be. I peeled. It opened. There was another card inside. Smaller. Yellowed. Almost brittle. And it was a page torn from a hospital form. The top said, Patient ID, Birthing Center, 1989. That was the year I was born. Below that, mother's name, Esther D. Kirkland, child, male. Name given, Nathan. No father listed. I stared at it for what must have been an hour. My head didn't even spin. It just stopped. Esther. Miss Esther. My neighbor. My emergency contact. My warm towel on a cold day. My first lesson on what calm sounds like. She hadn't just helped raise me. She'd birthed me, and I'd never known. It took me until morning to move. Not because I didn't believe it. That was the strange part. I did. Not one cell in my body resisted the idea that Miss Esther was my mother. My mind didn't scream, that's impossible. It whispered, of course. Like a piece of my foundation had shifted into place, not cracked. But believing it and understanding it are 2 different animals. I sat there, in the pale blue glow of the living room, Bible still open, notes still in my lap, watching the shadows crawl across the carpet like they had something to say. The radiator clicked on at 6:43. I hadn't blinked since 6:29. I left the house by 7, didn't shower, didn't brush my teeth, just threw on jeans and a sweatshirt and drove to the one place I thought might have answers. The house next door. Her house. It was still locked up, blinds closed, mailbox taped shut with a forwarding address in Diane's handwriting. The for sale sign had been jammed in the yard over the weekend. I parked my car at the curb, got out, and just stood on the sidewalk like a stray, like some kid who forgot his house key again. The porch light was still screwed in, that soft yellow bulb she never replaced, even when the rest of the neighborhood switched to LEDs. She said it gave her plants a gentler bedtime. I stood under it, even though it was morning, just needed something of hers above my head. I tried the door, locked, of course, but I knew where she kept the spare. It was still under the fake rock near the hydrangeas, still dusty, still chipped on the side. I remember when she bought it from a catalog and made me promise never to tell Diane. Family forgets. Dirt remembers, she'd said, with a wink. I let myself in. The smell hit first. Not musty, just frozen, like time had curled into the couch cushions and refused to leave. I walked through the living room slowly, like I might step on a ghost. Everything was neat. The chair near the window was still tilted at her favorite reading angle. Her half-finished crossword book sat on the armrest with a pen clipped to page 27. I didn't call out her name. Somehow, it didn't feel disrespectful. It felt real, like this place still belonged to her, even if her body didn't. I set the Bible down on her side table and started looking. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. More notes? A birth certificate? A photo of her pregnant? None of that made sense. If she'd hidden the truth this long, why would she leave a trail? But I searched anyway. Her file cabinet in the hallway, the manila envelopes in the closet, the attic trapdoor above the washer. I didn't know what proof would look like, but I knew the ache wouldn't leave until I found something that told me this wasn't a dream wearing her handwriting. I found a shoebox under her bed, not labeled, just rubber-banded shut, with a faint coffee stain on the side. Inside were receipts, clippings, and notes, mostly old grocery lists and coupons, but beneath them was a letter in a creased envelope with no stamp. My name was on the front, my full name, in her handwriting. I sat on the edge of the bed and read, "Nathan, if you're reading this, then I didn't tell you, and that is my greatest regret. I didn't lie because I didn't love you. I lied because I loved you too much to risk losing you. Your father, Robert, he told me early on that he wasn't cut out for the whole family act. I didn't believe him. I thought I could fix that. When you were born, he lasted 5 days. Said he couldn't be a father, couldn't be tied down to the ghost of some accident. But you weren't an accident, Nathan. You were the brightest thing I ever made from darkness. I gave you his last name because I thought it might bring him back. Stupid. I told people I was just the neighbor because my own parents wouldn't look me in the eye when I said I was keeping you. Diane thought I was embarrassing myself. But you kept coming over. You kept sitting at my table. And I kept being yours in every way I could be. I only ever wanted to be the kind of steady love that couldn't be taken away. E. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I didn't collapse. I just sat there on that bed I used to nap on as a kid, her Kethir blanket still half tucked, and stared at the wall like it might blink back at me. She had wanted to protect me. I understood that, but I didn't know what to do with it. I left the house an hour later and locked the door behind me. I didn't take anything. Not the letter, not the Bible, not even the photo of us in the kitchen with flour on our noses. I just needed to think. I drove. No destination. Just the kind of driving you do when sitting still feels like betrayal. Eventually, I ended up on the other side of town. Parked in front of a barber shop I hadn't stepped into in 8 years. Used to be my dad's spot. I sat there for 20 minutes before I got out. The guy behind the counter looked up like he was expecting me. Not in a creepy way, just familiar. "Hey, man, long time," he said. His name was Jared. He'd cut my hair a few times when I was a teenager. I'd come here with my dad before he left. "Didn't recognize the beard," he joked. "What brings you in?" I sat down in the empty chair across from him. "Did you know Robert Kirkland?" I asked. Jared leaned back. "Your dad?" I nodded. He scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, knew him a little. He wasn't a talker. Came in regular for a while, then just stopped showing up." "He ever say anything about Esther Kirkland?" Jared squinted. "Esther? Miss Esther?" Lived over on Glenview? Yeah. Jared rubbed his chin. Yeah, he mentioned her. Called her the lady next door. Said she helped out sometimes. Why? I paused. She was my mom. His eyes widened. No way. Way? He let out a low whistle. Damn. I always wondered why you had the same last name. Figured it was one of those weird coincidences. Not a coincidence, thought I said. And then I told him. Not all of it, but enough. About the note, about the hospital form, about the letter. Jared didn't interrupt, just listened, arms folded, mouth drawn in a straight line like he was stitching every word into a sweater he'd have to wear later. When I finished, he asked, "You gonna try to find him?" I didn't have an answer. I went home and called Diane. This time, she picked up. Her voice was clipped. "Hello? It's Nate." "Oh, hey. I was in Miss Esther's house today." A pause. "You mean my aunt's house?" "I found a note. In her Bible. It said she was my mother." Silence. Then, "You weren't supposed to take anything from that box." "She raised me," I said. "You know that." "She raised a lot of people. That doesn't mean—" "She named me," I snapped. "She gave me his last name because she thought he might come back." More silence. "Did you know?" A long breath. "No, I had suspicions, but she never told me. I thought maybe, after her sister died, after your dad left, that she just took you in to fill the hole. I was the hole." She didn't answer that. Later that night, I pulled out an old yearbook. Senior year. I flipped to the in memoriam page. My friend Josh had died that year. Car accident. Miss Esther helped me write something for the page. I found my picture. Under it, Nathan Kirkland. No middle name. I never had one. But I kept staring at that name like it might shift, like it might unspool and reveal something in the space between those letters. Kirkland, 7 characters that used to be his, then became hers, then became mine. Miss Esther hadn't told me, but she'd let me carry her name anyway. And now I wanted to know who else had carried it. The morning after I spoke to Diane, I did something I swore I'd never do again. I searched for my father. Not just some half-hearted social media scroll like I'd done in college. I mean, really searched. DMV records, state voter rolls, reverse address lookups from the scrap of mail I'd found wedged in Miss Esther's junk drawer from years ago. Something with a P.O. box in Kentucky, and his name on it, half crossed out. It felt wrong in my gut, like chasing someone who'd already chosen not to be found. But now, I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for the origin of the lie. I paid $50 for a background search. It took 15 minutes to come back. Robert N. Kirkland, born 1967, last known address, Franklin, Kentucky, no criminal record, registered his car in 2020, no social media, 1 bankruptcy filing in 2003. I stared at the results like they were a test I forgot to study for. There was a phone number. I didn't call it. Not yet. Instead, I did what felt like the next honest step. I drove to Glenview Cemetery. Miss Esther had been buried there under her maiden name, not Kirkland. The gravestone Diane ordered read Esther Dolores Harmon. I'd noticed it during the service, but hadn't thought much of it then. Just figured it was her way of keeping her family name intact. Now it felt deliberate, like the final lie, carved in granite. I stood over her plot with the Bible in one hand and the folded hospital form in the other. "I don't know what you wanted me to do with this," I said, "but I'm trying." The wind didn't answer, just rustled through the pines like it had secrets of its own. I dialed the number that night. No plan, no speech, just the raw ache of not knowing. 3 rings, 4. Then a voice. "Hello?" My heart jammed in my throat. "Robert?" I asked. Pause. Yeah, who's this? I didn't recognize the voice. It was lower than I remembered. Slower, like someone who'd been sanding himself down for years. It's Nate, I said. Nathan Kirkland. Long silence. Then, from Minnesota? Yes. Another pause. Is this about your mother? I blinked. You mean Miss Esther? She told you? She left a note. The line went so quiet I thought he hung up. Then, I always thought she might. We spoke for 20 minutes. It was the strangest conversation of my life. Not angry, not emotional, just two men trying to draw a family tree with missing branches. He didn't deny anything. Said he met Esther in the late 80s. She was working part-time at the library. He'd just been discharged from the Navy. They were never in love, not really. Just two people with overlapping loneliness. He left when I was 5 days old. I didn't know how to be anything but temporary, he said. I asked why he didn't at least tell me. Because I didn't think I deserved to, he said. And I figured she'd do better without me. She always did better. He said it like a man who'd rehearsed the line 1,000 times, like it had worn grooves in his throat. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote everything down, word for word. I didn't want to forget anything. Not the way his voice cracked on always, not the way he cleared his throat every time I got quiet. He didn't ask to meet, he didn't apologize, but he didn't run either. And somehow, that mattered more than I expected. A week passed. I didn't tell Diane. I didn't even tell my girlfriend Lacey, who'd been gently nudging me to talk about the weird mood I'd been in lately. Instead, I went back to Miss Esther's house one last time. The realtor was staging it the following Monday. This was my last window to say goodbye. I walked through each room slowly, stopping in places I used to hide when I was a kid. Behind the pantry door, under the guest bed, in the linen closet where she used to keep extra gum and Band-Aids because you never know which kind of wound you'll get. In her bedroom, I opened the top drawer of her nightstand. Inside was a single envelope with no name on it. I opened it. It was a letter. To me. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I looked at you, all I saw was the boy who let me be more than what the world told me I was allowed to be. I wasn't allowed to keep you. Not on paper. Not officially. But I kept you anyway. In my home. In my prayers. In every small corner of grace I could find. I don't need you to forgive me. I just need you to know I never stopped being your mother. Not for a second. E. That was the first time I cried. Not loud, not theatrical. Just sat on the edge of her bed and let my shoulders shake while the late afternoon sun split through the blinds like a broken halo. I don't remember how long I stayed, but when I stood up, I felt taller. Not because anything had been fixed, but because I'd finally stopped shrinking myself to fit someone else's version of the truth. The next day, I had a locksmith change the lock on her front door. I called the realtor and said I'd be buying the house. Diane didn't fight me. Said she'd already had too many memories tied up in that place. I knew what she meant. Shame wears long shadows, even when you think you've outrun it. I didn't care about the mortgage. I cared about the walls that remembered my laughter. I cared about the carpet, still stained with juice from my 7th birthday. I cared about the space where a woman with quiet hands and a folded truth had chosen to raise a boy who never knew how wanted he really was. A month later, I moved in. No ceremony, no big reveal, just boxes and breath. I put the Bible on the living room shelf. I kept the hospital form in a frame near my bed, not as proof, but as a reminder that the things we aren't told still shape who we are. Sometimes, even more than the things we are. One morning, about 6 weeks in, I found a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. Old, faded, early 90s, judging by the clothes. It was of Esther holding me, tiny, swaddled, blinking at the camera like I wasn't sure how light worked yet. Her eyes were soft, her smile real. On the back, in handwriting I recognized, were 4 words: "You were always mine." The photo stayed on the fridge for a week before I moved it. Not because I didn't want to see it, because I couldn't stop staring at it. Every time I passed by, it pulled me in like it had gravity. I'd pause with a coffee mug in one hand and just get swallowed by it. Her smile, my scrunched up face, the way she held me with one arm tucked under my shoulders and the other angled like a shield. Eventually, I framed it and placed it by the front door. If she was going to haunt me, she might as well greet every guest. Living in her house was quieter than I remembered. It wasn't just the silence. It was the absence of her rhythm. She used to hum when she folded towels. Shuffle her slippers across the kitchen linoleum with a beat only she understood. Even the refrigerator buzz felt different now. Less companion, more appliance. I spent the first 2 weeks cleaning, repainting, fixing things that didn't need fixing. I wasn't trying to erase her. I was trying to find her fingerprints beneath the dust. Every drawer I opened, every cabinet I reorganized, felt like peeling layers of a woman who never wanted to take up space unless you needed her. The more I looked, the more I realized she'd hidden pieces of herself everywhere. Not secrets, signs. There was a stack of VHS tapes in a bin under the living room couch. I almost tossed them, assuming they were old church recordings or home shopping shows, but something told me to look closer. Each tape had a strip of masking tape across the edge, labeled not by event, but by mood. Nate, age 6, the funny hat day. Nate, sick day, tummy tea plus blanket song. Rainy Sunday, just piano. I didn't have a VHS player anymore, so I bought one off Craigslist from a guy who asked no questions and offered me a cup of apple cider while I waited for him to untangle the cords. That night, I watched the funny hat day. The footage was grainy. I was wearing a bright green cowboy hat, trying to lasso an ottoman, while Miss Esther stood behind the camera, laughing so hard she wheezed. "Nathan," she said through giggles, "if you knock over that lamp, I swear—" I did. It fell with a crash. She howled. Then the frame jittered, and she must have set the camera down because suddenly I saw her, rushing in to pick me up and kiss my head and say, "That lamp never liked us anyway." I didn't know I remembered that moment until I saw it. It had lived in me, quietly, without shape. Now it had a voice. The next tape was labeled, "Night Before School, Nate's Green Shirt Phase." In the video, I was folding my arms and refusing to wear anything but a lime green t-shirt that had a dinosaur on it. Miss Esther was sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding out a sweater like it was an olive branch. "I'm not cold," I insisted. "It's for inside," she said gently. "I'm not cold inside either." "You might be," she replied. "Feelings sneak in that way." I laughed out loud, watching that one. Not because I was funny, because she always was. That weekend, I invited Lacey over. We'd been dating almost a year, but I hadn't let her inside the house since I moved in. She thought it was about privacy. I think part of me was afraid the walls would whisper too loudly, that she'd see someone else's childhood mapped in every corner and realize I didn't fit the mold of a man raised by that kind of love. But she didn't look overwhelmed. She looked like she understood. She sat on the couch and watched the tapes with me. After one particularly silly one, me pretending to be a news anchor with a paper towel roll, Lacey turned and said, "She loved you like air." I nodded. Turns out I was breathing her in the whole time. That night I showed Lacey the letter. Not the first one, the last one, the one I found in the nightstand. She read it slowly, her fingers grazing the folds like she didn't want to bruise the paper. When she finished, she didn't speak right away. Then she said, "You know this doesn't change who you are, right?" I looked at her. "No," I said. "It explains it." The following Monday, I got a letter from Diane. Typed, formal. It said she'd gone through her own boxes and found some photos that might be of interest to you. There was no apology, but there were pictures. One of them stopped me cold. It was Miss Esther, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, young, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a braid. On the back, written in the same slanted script as always, "Me and Mara, day 2. I called Diane." "Who's Mara?" She paused. "You really don't know?" "No." "She was Robert's sister, your aunt. She's the one who told Esther to keep you." My hand gripped the phone tighter. "She was around for a while," Diane continued. "Stayed with Esther during the last trimester. Then she left. I think she moved south. No one really stayed in touch after that." I asked if she had an address. Diane didn't. But the next day I started looking again. It took 2 weeks and a librarian's help. But I found her. Mara Kirkland, now Mara Langston, living in a quiet corner of Tennessee, retired, running a plant nursery. I called. Didn't plan to, but I did. When she answered, I introduced myself and said my name. There was a pause. Then, "My God, you sound like her." We talked for hours. She told me about the pregnancy, the fear, the family rejection. She said Esther had always been the backbone, even when no one wanted her to be. "She wasn't the one who made the mistake," Mara said, "but she was the one who stood by you anyway." "She didn't see it as a mistake, Bea," I said. "No," Mara agreed. "She saw it as a calling." Mara told me something else, that Esther had written to her every year on my birthday, sent pictures, updates, a note about how I was doing in school, what I'd grown out of, what I loved. She didn't need to, Mara said, but she said it helped her breathe. I asked if she still had the letters. Mara said yes, and that she'd send them. When they arrived, I sat on the floor of the living room and read them one by one. There were 16. Some were typed. Some were scribbled on the backs of church bulletins or grocery lists. Each one started the same way. "Nathan is still mine." Just in case the world forgets, I want someone to remember. Each one ended with, "Tell no one." But tell him I never left. She hadn't. Not for a second. Later that week, I passed the mirror in the hallway and caught myself off guard. It wasn't the face that surprised me. It was the way I was standing. One hand on my hip, the other gesturing mid-thought. The same way Miss Esther used to explain everything from toaster issues to the Book of Ruth. I smiled. Not because I finally had all the answers, but because I finally knew who'd shape the questions. Spring came slow that year. Snow didn't leave so much as recede, like it was dragging its heels. It melted in irregular patches across the front yard, one corner bare, the other still crusted in old white. But under the maple tree, where I used to pile leaves as a kid, the first crocus bloomed. It felt like a wink, like she was still tending the yard somehow, even if her hands weren't in the dirt. I planted her favorite flowers in April. Not for some big gesture. No ceremony, no tribute plaque. I just remembered how she used to hum while pruning the azaleas, and how she'd clap her hands softly to chase off squirrels. I found an old Polaroid in her junk drawer, me in overalls, holding a watering can twice my size, and decided it was time to pick up where I left off. Lacey helped. We didn't talk much while planting, just worked side by side in the kind of comfortable quiet that feels earned. At one point she paused, wiped dirt from her cheek, and said, "You know you look more like her every day?" I blinked. "Esther?" "Yeah, not in the face, in the hands, the way you move." I hadn't realized it, but once she said it, I couldn't unsee it. The following week, I started the paperwork to change my middle name. I didn't want to erase Kirkland. It belonged to her too, in its own twisted way, but I wanted to carry her name in the place most people skipped over. Nathan Harmon Kirkland. I said it aloud a few times. Let it settle. Let it taste like truth. Mar called again in May. She'd found another box of Esther's things, stuff she'd packed away years ago and forgotten about. Letters, photos, a cassette tape labeled simply, Nathan, age 3, rainstorm day. She mailed it. I had to borrow an old tape recorder from the library to play it. When it started, I expected noise, muffled play sounds, maybe a song. What I heard was her voice, clear, warm, unhurried, reading aloud from a children's book. The wind rattled the windows, but the boy was not afraid. He had a blanket, a bear, and a woman who sang stories into the storm. Then silence. Then her voice again, softer. You won't remember this, but I hope someday you feel it anyway. I sat there for a long time after that, not crying, not talking, just feeling it anyway. One afternoon I got a call from a woman I didn't recognize. She said her name was Rose, that she'd gone to church with Miss Esther for years. She'd heard from someone who'd heard from Diane that I was living in the house now. She asked if she could stop by, said she had something Miss Esther had asked her to hold on to, just in case. When she arrived, she was wearing a sun hat and holding a white envelope with my name written on it in blue ink. Inside was a small key and a note. For the lockbox in the linen closet. Don't trust the code. Trust your hands. I stared at her. There's a lockbox? She nodded. She said it held the pieces not meant for childhood. I never asked. It took me 2 hours to find it, behind the second shelf of towels, under a loose floorboard. The box was metal, about the size of a toaster, rusted at the corners. The key fit. Inside were 4 things. A small stack of legal documents, my birth certificate, with her name now listed as mother, a custody draft she never filed, and a copy of a notarized letter from a lawyer stating that the child Nathan Kirkland resided with Esther Harmon continuously since infancy. A necklace, plain silver chain, with a charm that said, "Still yours." A receipt from a photo booth. 2 pictures. Her, holding me on her lap, both of us looking half asleep. A final letter. Nathan, if you ever find this, it means you've already done the hardest part. Looked. I didn't want to burden you with my grief, so I planted love instead, in slow, quiet ways. You don't owe me anything. Not a visit, not a grave flower, not even a memory. But if you choose to carry me, I hope it's as something light. A hum in the kitchen, a story in a storm, a hand reaching back to lift someone else. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just steady. E. I read that letter 5 times. Then I made a choice. The next Sunday, I sat on the back steps with my laptop and wrote a post for a local message board. Looking for stories about Esther Harmon. She lived on Glenview, raised more than one of us. If she touched your life, even briefly, I'd love to hear it. By the end of the day, I had 11 replies. By the end of the week, I had 42. One woman said Miss Esther bought her prom dress when her mom couldn't. A former classmate said she used to pack him peanut butter crackers every Friday because he couldn't afford school lunch. An old mail carrier said she always remembered his birthday, even when he changed routes. Another man, now a teacher, said Miss Esther once found him crying on her porch steps when he was 10. She brought out iced tea and sat next to him for an hour without saying a word. He never forgot that silence. I collected them all, printed them, bound them into a book titled Still Yours. I didn't publish it, just kept it on the shelf beside her Bible. On what would have been her 79th birthday, I walked 2 blocks down to the library she used to volunteer at. I donated a copy of the book. Inside the front cover, I wrote, "She wasn't mine by blood, but she made me whole anyway. NK." The librarian, Older, curly gray hair, half-moon glasses, read it and smiled. "She was a good one," she said. "She still is," I replied. "Sometimes I walk the neighborhood at dusk, just to hear the cicadas the way she did, just to pass the porch where she used to sit with that blue mug of decaf and hum along to the wind chimes. I like to imagine she still watches, still folds her napkin 3 times before she sets it down, still waits quietly for someone to feel brave enough to ask, 'Whose name do I really carry?' I know mine now, and I say it with pride. My name is Nathan Harmon Kirkland, and the woman next door didn't just raise me, she made me." If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.